Dr. Pearlman.
Hi, Maya.
Thank you so much for joining me today. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. And by here, I mean my bedroom, the bottom of my bed. um, how are you?
I'm great. It's so nice to be here with you too. We were chatting a moment ago. I'm taking this brief mat leave with my new puppy. So I'm in my home office, and it's amazing how much we can do when we have to from anywhere.
Exactly. No, that's very true. And I'm so excited to talk to you about International Women's Day this year on 8th of March. And we were chatting briefly when we saw each other last week about this idea that this International Women's Day feels very different than the ones of years past. So I'd love to know your thoughts on that. How are you seeing that it's different from your perspective?
Well, I think if we flash back to 2020 and this time a year ago, who would have thought that in just 1 year, women internationally could have lost so much? So many of the gains that we women have made over the past many decades in society, in the workplace, in our careers, and the world being so changed in just 1 year. But one thing, seeing women on a regular basis, actually right through this global pandemic, both virtually and in person, dealing with health, hormones, vitality, and beauty, one thing that is a very common theme that as a woman living through this myself, both as a doctor but also as a mom, as a wife, as a friend, is that we all are saying we've aged 3 years, 5 years over the span of the last one. And that is not just a saying. Those are not just words. That to me is a real phenomenon that is occurring, has occurred, does occur when women are pressured with chronic stress. So we think about, the chronic stress of living through this pandemic, but particularly as a woman, and particularly for women who are in a certain stage of their life and maybe already were just barely scraping by. And so, what chronic stress does to women physiologically, biologically, in terms of aging them is really profound. And it is something I think a lot about more than ever, is sharing the science of, what stress does for women particularly, and what can be done about that. So for me, thinking about what I want to, challenge, what I want to share is a very optimistic and proactive message about taking the science and making sure that this time next year we're feeling our very best, and we hopefully have undone some of the carnage of the pandemic on women.
I'd love to hear more about that, about how chronic stress can impact and sort of exacerbate the process of aging, how you've seen chronic stress manifest in your patients, and of course what can be done to combat some of that. We know the stress will be there, right? The stressors are around us, but what can we do while continuing to care for aging parents and look after children and try to do work while 3 other people are in Zoom school, and support partners who may be struggling while we're trying to keep all of these balls in the air. What can we do to combat some of that chronic stress?
So, carrying on from where you left off, is that it's not so much about changing our reality, but learning to filter, cope, and adapt. So that's a good news, because so much of what we're dealing with, and one of the reasons it's so stressful right now, is things are out of our control. So when something seems out of our control, like if you're a farmer, the weather, right? These are actually considered the greatest stressors. So for all of us living through this global, pandemic that we were certainly not expecting or prepared for, let's say just over a year ago, has been very particularly stressful on top of all the other stressors. I'll just keep putting I have tiny ears, my AirPods keep falling off. So let me start with the science. How does it age us? And there's a lot of complex science, but I'll share one very important story. Nobel Prize winning research that was actually done by a woman, Elizabeth Blackwell, who was the founder of the biologic limit of our lifespan, the telomere. And all of her work, so this work on aging, the limit of our lifespan, was done on chronically stressed women. These were mothers to chronically ill children. This she found to be the greatest stressor for women, which we know to be the case. So chronically ill child ranks number one, just above marital difficulty, marital discord, divorce. What we found in these women is that their telomeres, their protective caps at the end of their chromosomes, were shortened, they were damaged. And with all of her research following this amazing discovery, the only consistent intervention that reliably undid some of that damage, preserved, lengthened even telomeres, was stress, evidence-based, stress alleviating techniques, things like mindfulness, meditation. So to the next part of your question, as to what do we do when our situation is stressful, I think just the knowledge, what I like to share with patients, just the knowledge that it is not your reality that will do you in. And I see this all the time in my practice. I mean, let's talk before COVID, women, people with seemingly trivial issues that are completely overwhelmed and can't cope. Whereas others who have these seemingly insurmountable burdens of stressors and difficulties and hardships, and they are resilient and thrive and endure. So I think it's important to know, I guess, another piece of science, which is our body actually thrives under stress, some stress. Hormesis is a very important physiologic concept, which means a little bit of stress makes us stronger. Think of the mouse and the mousetrap that gets out. A little bit of stress makes us stronger. Whether it's heat shock therapy, cold showers, exercise itself, all the benefits of exercise come because we're stressing our bodies. In fact, in the midst of our workouts, we're not healthier, we're breaking down muscle. So a little bit of stress, that powerful knowledge that stress is not our enemy, it's our brain, it's our perception, it's our ability or inability to filter that stress. So now already you are equipping yourself with a mindset of survivorship, of resiliency, that regardless of what you are facing, the kids, the partner, the pandemic, a personal health challenge, your mindset is what you can focus on and what will actually shape how well you can adapt and how well you will thrive on the other side of the hurdle of stress. So I use the concept of a filter, that we can set our filter quite finely to sort of sift through what we choose to deal with, because again, we do need to let some of these stressors in so we can make an action plan. I always say, turn your problems into projects. And if it's not too much all at once, too big, too much for too long, then the more we sort of work through a challenge, come up with solutions, we have puzzles and gems that will help us to just do better with something similar or different the very next time. So I think the mindset, the filtering concept is very powerful. And I think it's also important to recognize, because I am seeing this all the time in practice. In fact, I suffer from it myself, the idea that not all of us are necessarily wearing our stress in emotions or anxiety. We may not feel stress. So I pointed here because many of us may wear our stress in muscle tension. So, I'm someone where I find myself clenching. And I'll never forget an article I wrote, a bunch of health tips. Pink, the singer, the famous singer, her health tip was open your mouth, and exactly just to counteract this tendency of holding your face in tension. So whether it's grinding, whether it's neck tension, muscle tension will be one place, a frown, right? Some of these other areas where we hold muscle tension, in our way of internalizing stress, this would be one common pattern. Gut disturbance. In kids, the number one cause of an upset stomach, of tummy ache, is anxiety. So we learn it early. In adults, IBS, that irritable bowel, constipation, diarrhea, bloating. So often this may be a manifestation of stress. And in others, we may find that we get achy, we get sore, our joints, inflammation. Ultimately, stress increases our risk of chronic disease. Breast cancer, we know, often follows a stressful life event, as well as for women, a heart attack, cardiac events can actually be precipitated, broken heart syndrome, by a severe emotional upset. So I think it's very important to recognize that we have a responsibility to really hone our skills like an athlete to protect our future, whether it's our future, our breasts, our heart, but particularly our future brain, because we both are women in our 40s, and it's our health style, our lifestyle, our life choices in these critical years that will shape the brain we're left with. We get to enjoy, hopefully, in our 80s. And chronic stress, in addition to all the things I talked about, the grinding, the muscle tension, the increased risks, also erodes your brain vitality, your cognitive well-being, and leaves you at higher risk of things like depression and ultimately dementia. So we do have a duty for our future selves to future-proof our brain and our body through these stress relieving techniques.
That's really, really helpful. And when you talk about mindset, and that one of the keys is to be aware and to shape our mindset as a way of developing resiliency and protecting ourselves now and into the future. What are some of the ways people can develop that resilient mindset or change their current mindset?
So I think, when we kind of become more self-aware, we can really start to understand what are our sort of like the negative habits we have in terms of our thinking. Just knowing that this is very much brain training. Your stress resiliency, it's something you want to work on when you're not stressed. You want to work on it like an athlete would, so that when that stressor hits you in the face, you're like an athlete ready for competition, and you're like, I got my game face on, and I've got you. So I think it's important to recognize what are some of your sort of negative habits that are getting in your way, some of which might be genetic. So we do know that some people genetically are worriers, who are more likely to ruminate on negativity, a negative situation, versus the warrior gene makeup. This is something we test for, we see in our practice, who tend to be warriors because they're more resilient in that they can just move on from this. The serotonin and the dopamine don't sort of percolate on the brain the same way when these situations happen. So the kind of things, regardless of where you come from, that can be very helpful are practices like mindfulness, being aware of what makes you feel negative, what makes you feel good. A meditative practice, and I really want people to open their ideas around meditation. I'm not someone who likes to do formal, I've not been someone who formally meditates, but I run. And the Japanese call the kind of running I do often like outdoor jogging, forest bathing. So whether it's brisk walk, but the powerful influence of nature, for me, that's my meditation. And so I just want people to open their eyes or their minds to what a meditative practice for them can be. But it must be something where your brain has space to breathe. So it means pushing the world around you away for a moment. Deep breathing is one of the most powerful anxiety relieving techniques. So maybe just, if I can, I'll take you through a quick breathing exercise that I teach. And this is proven to sort of change your fight-flight mode, to really work to support anti-anxiety reflexes within your body. The idea is that we want to take a deep Inhalation through our nose, okay, with your hands on your belly. And as you breathe in, your belly, so it's called belly breathing because your belly brings itself forward like a gift into your interlaced, like this, hands. I know you can't see my belly. That is opposite to how you would normally breathe. So the belly expands with that inhalation. As the lung capacity is increased, the diaphragm comes down. So often, especially for women, we breathe very superficially, very shallowly, and opposite. So really just getting that belly breathing going with an inhalation through your nose that's twice as long as how you will exhale. So you are breathing in and through your nose like you're smelling a rose, and then releasing through an open mouth. Again, open, back to Pink's words, relaxes the jaw, visualizing that you're blowing out a candle. So air's going out of your mouth like you're blowing out a candle. And so in through your nose like you're smelling a rose, and out through your mouth, visualizing yourself actually breathing air to blow out that candle, smelling in the scent of that candle. Maybe it's lavender, maybe it's rose or vanilla, whatever you like, and actually visualizing your breaths with my cues of a rose and a candle and that very slow pace of breathing. So right away what we're doing, we're expanding our diaphragm. We shut down the fight flight. We are using visualization on top of that deep breathing technique to literally shift our thoughts away from whatever it was. And then that's a practice that, of course, you want to have ready on hand for when you need it, which means you have to practice it because it is opposite to what we do in our regular day-to-day activity with shallow breath. So I just mentioned 4 things. I'll just review them. So mindfulness, that idea of just recognize your negative habits, because you can, with training, erase them. Like a skier might choose to go down a new track and replace them with positive habits. Mostly brain habits, but maybe there are other things as well. The idea of meditation, opening up your mind literally and figuratively to realize it doesn't have to be in a very formal way. It can be doing something that gets you out of your zone and into your brain zone. The third idea was deep breathing, so that belly breathing technique that I just went through with you. And the fourth, evidence-based practice that I double up. I like to be efficient, and we use visualization as part of that deep breathing exercise. So there you go. There's 4 really great techniques that no matter where you are, you would have access to.
Thank you so much. Those are, and just through that brief deep breathing and visualization, I just feel already just that much more relaxed and also embodied, I would say, and present. So thank you so much. And so I guess, thinking back again to the pandemic and stress and International Women's Day, and this year the theme is, as we were chatting about, choose to challenge. And that can be, I love that because it can mean so much and can be interpreted and embodied in different ways. So I'm really curious what that theme means to you.
I think more than ever, women really need to challenge all of whether it's from within or often from, outside in their environment, all the boundaries, all the limitations that are containing us. And, I think back, let's think before COVID, because it's sort of like we're always there and they're just cornering us into such a tight space in this last year, and I do think it's incredible what's been lost. I'm optimistic, but only with effort, a concerted global effort internationally amongst women can we really reclaim what had been gained, and then, as we used to say, break through the barriers. At one time we were talking about gender equity in just a few years from now. So what I would say is that, let's start identifying what are those limitations, what are those barriers, and how can each of us in our daily lives, and then perhaps collectively together, try to challenge those, change the conversation. I think it comes back to, like we were talking about, this conversation mindset, the idea that it is a choice not to just accept confinement, limitations, and boundaries, but recognize where we can take action and challenge and reset, push forward, advance boundaries and limitations. And I do think it's, I talked about reclaiming some of what's been lost, but it's actually probably more a redefining of what that unlocking of the glass ceiling really means for women, because our future, not only as women, but as societies around the world, it will look different as we think about moving on beyond these days of lockdowns and restrictions and pandemic.
Yes, I think we're all looking forward to those days. Certainly, I think there's things that I hope we can carry forward from this time, but there's so much work to do. So thank you so much for your time today. It's really been a pleasure to talk with you. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
I did as well. There's clearly so much to talk about, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be here with you, and looking forward to all of the content you produce on this amazing platform that you've built. Thank you for what you do. I think it's clear there's no better time to be bringing voice to the complexity and the needs that women, particularly women in our 40s, have more than ever. So happy International Women's Day, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.